Welcome back to Raptor-One.
Raptor-One, Voyagers of the Stars. Season 2, Chapter 12, The Yawn at Velt. The board votes for a wrench. Velt still sat on the slab like a bruise. 3 dull screws for the grid anchors, a black shard for the silencer relay, a copper ribbon bent to mean yawn, a tooth that had learned to linger. June slid in a dead man canister labeled inventory, and Saran did not open it until the ember had been set on the basin's lip. Ira had counted for slow, and Tessa's unpretty hum had settled the room. Inside, 2 things on tidy paper. Accord Amber Advisory / 77B, lean right behavior observed. Auditor finds are converting into posture leans that demand inspection. Countermeasures: vary honesty, refuse signatures, cut leans with non-signal motions, bank count before remedy. Accord Amber Advisory / 77C, dockside quiet protocols. Lean right leans may jump to tools and gantries. Yard must work in inventory speak. No clocks outsing the yard bell. No lights brighter than the band. No names until the invoice is written. Countermeasures: rope hand removal, hinge limp variance kits, ember isolation mounts. Chiron read both once, then placed them on the board with the care one gives hot kettles. Auditor writes fines into rooms, he said. Lean right turns them into strings you tie to yourselves. 77C says those strings can catch the yard if we bring them in carelessly. Varric flexed his ruined arm and didn't pretend it had behaved lately. He thumped a sable, 3 hinge on the slab. Its worst one, the one with the honest click. We need a bench, not bravado. Repairs, Saran said. Not request, schedule. Dock 12 at Helix Wharf. We'll fit a limp variance kit, so our ugly is different every day. Darrow gets rope cleats cut for lean removal. Ember gets isolation mounts. Chiron and Talon teach the yard the small knife, shallow only. Talon touched 77C with 2 fingers. And we keep the yard from becoming a stage. We do this work without teaching a trick. The elder's scar creased like a knot. You'll come back with a new hinge and a handful of bills, they said dryly. Staple the bills to the board so no one pays twice. Bring 8. The tall median intoned from the doorway. Blind lens, the organizer added, deputizing Cyrus with a tilt of their chin. Leave room, the elder finished, and the hood above the hearth side like good habit. Transit, with tickets hanging. They went out late, plain, stubborn. Waist heat folded into a slope so convincingly tired it could have applied for disability. Hinge singing the wrong note. Count laid beneath everything like flooring. The lean right tried them twice on the way, filaments unrolling from a relay's lingering hush to glue themselves to the ship's posture. Darrow lifted rope the way one retrieves thread from thorn, slow, honest, non-signal, and drew the lean off the hull's manor onto a coil that could be burned later without ceremony. Lean cut, he reported, and did not let satisfaction sharpen his voice into a lesson. Logged, Chiron said. No signatures given. Cyrus angled the blind lens toward the bulkhead. Check in? He breathed. Here, Tessa said without turning. No beacon. A beat. You? Hungry, steady, he answered, saving one sentence for after. Good correction, she said, and he stood taller on the inside. Helix Wharf grew from Gray River's rib like a patient gear. It did not blink, it measured. Helix Wharf, a yard that refuses theater. Dock 12 wasn't pretty. It was competent. Amber bands that never brightened past the median's bracelets. Cranes that moved like librarians who knew where everything lived. gantries that wore the dust of 1,000 honest days. Rules stenciled in chipped paint at the airlock. NO sparks hotter than the band. No clock outsyncs the yard bell. No names until the invoice is written. No broadcast. Leave room. The yardmaster, Mara Essel, forearms like solve problems, met them with a clipboard that had learned to be a shield. "We work in inventory speak here," she said. "If you brought a story, leave it in the lock." "Brought a hinge," Varric said, holding up the offender. "Better than a story," Mara replied, pleased. Her gaze flicked to Darrow's coil, Chiron's clay tokens, Tessa's felt sling. "You brought sense. Good. Dock 12, lane 3. Yard bell calls the time. Don't outsing it." Band stayed cool as Raptor-One slid into cradle. The measure throat hummed approval. The hood over the bay sighed the pride out of the hangar and replaced it with boredom. You could work inside. Bank first, then wrenches. Firewatch doesn't happen only in halls. They set the ember on dock 12's basin. Ira counted. Tessa tucked her hum beneath. The yard bell answered present. Only when the tone held like a chair did anyone lift a tool. Mara's crew moved like people who've learned to make kindness a posture. Varric and a hinge smith named Sun riveted in the limp variants kit. 3 settings for plausible imperfection. Old pain, new bruise, and my nephew fixed it. They tuned the click so no 2 days would be suspiciously identical. Darrow and a cleat cutter drilled lean guides into the starboard corridor, dull ceramic posts that rope likes and leans prefer to sit on. Non-signal only, Darrow reminded, and the cutter, Cotran's cousin twice removed, nodded without asking for a story. Talon chalked a wall with timings, then wiped them off, then chalked them again. The small knife set shallow. Teach the ship, they told the yard, not the room. Chiron sat with dock admin and filled out forms in ways that made the forms do the work. He submitted 3 maintenance requests for the citations themselves and misfiled them into a bin labeled repairs, cleaning. A clerk who likes power is helpless before a stamp that says it has already been used. Ira walked the catwalks and learned the yard's flows. Gantry patience, bell cadence, the place where relief collects and must be swept up before it turns into a speech. Tessa watched the embers isolation mounts go in, felt pads, and a carbon brace that let count pass into hull as posture, not as signal. "It will keep time," she said. "It will not teach." Cyrus brewed tea that tasted like having finished something and labeled it steady in grease pencil. He set his 2 rain filters over the bay lamps to make dock light look like weather instead of performance. Saran did the captain's quiet job, asked each person what would make tomorrow easier on their bad day, and wrote it on the back of the clipboard beneath NO names until the invoice is written. Repairs that don't teach tricks. The yard bell marked hours the way good rain marks windows. Work didn't clap, it accumulated. Varric, torso under an open panel, called out settings as Sun ticked the hinge through its new repertoire. "Old pain," Varric said. Click, a low, honest complaint. "New bruise," he said. TCK, sharp, then gone. "My nephew fixed it," he said, unable not to grin. TCHCH, the kind of lie a room believes because it wants to. Sun snorted. "Your nephew is in trouble." "Everyone's nephew is in trouble," Varric replied, rolling his shoulder once and finding it more forgiving than yesterday. At the lean guides, Darrow taught 2-yarders how to lift a lean right thread with rope and never yank. "Spiders want you to panic," he said. "We do not panic. We put the spider on furniture and sweep it outside." "Is the spider mad?" one asked. It is bored, Darrow said. We love that for it. Talon and Chiron sat back to back by a tool chest and wrote the knife shallow in 4 different dialects the yard could carry without teaching the room. Alliance maintenance, accord interval, dock 12 shift change, and a mutter that only door seals can hear. Varied honesty, Talon said, tapping 77B. That's the tax we pay instead of signatures. Ira chalked a thin rest on the hangar floor beside the cradle's nose and asked Mara to leave it unmopped. Narrators trip on silence, she explained. Mara lifted one corner of her mouth. I prefer them to break a heel. Tessa watched the embers mount sway on purpose when a gantry trundled by. The count didn't wobble. She rested her palm on the felt sling and let relief be physics instead of a speech. Cyrus didn't film a montage. He wrote 3 labels for drawers that had always held the same things. Hinge, ugly. Rope, honest. Knife, shallow. Later, if anyone asked what they'd done here, he could point to weather instead of fireworks. Saran inventoried costs in pencil and didn't read them aloud. Dock quiet, heart loud. Dock 12 had its own hood, a bell mouth that drank heat and returned boredom. Under it, on a bench that had learned not to squeak, Tessa and Cyrus honored the small ritual they'd repaired as carefully as any hinge. One sentence, she said, mouth tilted. He thought, sifted, kept almost all of them. I liked that the yard had rules and they felt like kindness, he said. Me too, she replied, and the echo didn't make a show of itself. They kissed once, no clatter, then let the yard bell have the room again. Check in? He asked after a breath. Here, she said. Still no beacon. A small grin. You? He tapped the label on the T10, steady, and nodded. The inspector that wasn't. On the second day, the Leanwright sent an inspector that was not a person. It arrived as a coolness across the gantry rails and a request without grammar. Present your purpose. Mara didn't look up from her clipboard. Inventory, she told the air. Bay 12. Hinge variants. Rope guides. Ember isolation. Invoice pending. The coolness slid toward Raptor-One and found 77C already stapled to the bay's wall. Dockside quiet protocols. No sparks hotter than the band. No clock outsing the bell. No names until the invoice is written. It palped the rest Ira had asked to leave unmopped and stepped around silence, as if embarrassed to have been seen nearly stepping on it. A thin thread reached for the ember and missed because the new mount let count be posture without leaving a signature. Another filament settled onto a lean guide and, finding itself comfortable, stayed there instead of making law. Lean on furniture, Darrow murmured, amused. We'll sweep you later. Bill it to 77C, Saran said. Chiron filed a maintenance request for the inspector itself and slid it into the repairs, cleaning folder, where impossible paperwork goes to be true. Paying and posting. By the third day, the hinge's new repertoire sounded lived in. The lean guides had collected 2 threads that the yard disposed of like old spiders, and the embers mount had taught the ship how to carry rhythm like a responsibility, not a performance. They settled the invoice with Dock Admin. Hinge variants kit, installed, tested. Lean guides, starboard corridors, installed. Ember isolation mounts, installed. Clerk time, forms misfiled in their rightful places. Yard bell, saying boredom, tipped nothing over. Saran stapled the bill to a corner of the board back at the pocket with a small, disrespectful nail. Under 77B and 77C, Cyrus wrote in grease pencil. Paid, varied honesty. Counter, hinge, ugly, different, rope, and on signal, knife, shallow, ember, isolated. Bring me the next ticket, the elder said, and I'll make a ladle out of it. Orders that smell like work. News kept its habit. 2 citations found on cleaning plates upriver. Leans attempting to make kindness queue up. A parliament of curtains rumored at Spindle Moor, hosting boredom like a festival and issuing peer reviews of craft posture. Low choir's hum shifted again, no longer unknown, not radiant, something miscounted and honest, as if a corridor were practicing being a person. After repairs, Saran said, we go to Spindle. We cut liens without teaching tricks. We don't let a parliament turn boredom into law. Then we listen to low choir without asking it to be a song. Bring 8, the tall median said from the doorway, as if the dock extended into the hall. Blind lens, the organizer added. Leave room, the yard bell seemed to say, and maybe it did. Departure, with new ugliness. They left dock 12 the way they arrived. Late, plain, stubborn. The hinge clicked old pane to start, then new bruise a corridor later. The lean right reached and found rope. The auditor looked for a signature and found T labeled steady where a speech should have been. In their chairs, Cyrus leaned toward Tessa. After Spindle, we choose a new sentence? Late, she said, smiling at the empty spot where the yard bell had been, and we make the lean right wait to hear it. Raptor-One tipped her bow toward work that would never clap for them, a parliament that wanted to legalize waiting, a corridor that might want to join the world, and carried a hinge that could lie 3 different ways, an ember that refused to be a sun, a drawer full of keys, and a handful of bills stapled where others could learn what not to pay again. The agenda you don't accept. Spindle Moor wasn't a place so much as a tone, a broad, pearlescent quiet where lanes braid like hair and then forget who braided them. Ira laid her palm on the NAV glass and felt the pull that means quorum forming, attention pooling without velocity. Parliament, Talon said, not impressed. Curtains in committee. They'll try to turn boredom into policy. Then we arrive as citizens, not petitioners, Saran answered. No speeches, no signatures. We vary our honesty until their forms give up. Varric thumbed the new limp variant switch. The hinge answered with old pain, low and plausible. He toggled once for new bruise, sharp, then contrite. He left it there to begin. Darrow clipped a fresh coil into the lean guides along starboard. The rope lay where a hand could find it without asking permission. Threads come off on furniture, he reminded the room. We sweep later. Chiron and Talon reviewed their pocket of timings. The small knife set shallow, written in 4 dialects the more would tolerate. We cut bureaucracy, Chiron said dryly, without teaching the clerk what a knife looks like. Ira counted 4 slow. Tessa set her hum beneath, late by a hair. The ember in its isolation cradle warmed and didn't volunteer to be admired. Cyrus turned his blind lens to the bulkhead and spoke their habit low. Check in? Here. No beacon, Tessa said. You? Hungry, steady. 1 sentence banked for after. Good correction, she murmured, and the words made his shoulder loosen in the right way. On my word, Saran said, and the ship agreed without making a show of it. Call to order. The more brightened by a nuance only people in trouble notice. 5 keeper curtains arranged themselves like officials behind a long invisible table, edges squared to the corridor as if they could lean forward and clasp hands. A pressure touched the hull, not radio, not light. A form without paper. Order of business. Review of craft posture. Item 1. Purpose. Item 2. Declaration of lateness. Item 3. Accounting of plainness. Item 4. Stubbornness permit. Minutes will not reflect attendance, Chiron said softly, and laid a razor posture into the field. Maintenance interval. Dull, fractionally wrong. The order rippled, line items searching for a number to assign to them. Item 2. Again declare lateness. Iris at a rest where the audit expected a sentence. The room tripped on silence and had to pretend it hadn't. Varric toggled the hinge to my nephew fixed it. TCHCH. The Moore's clerks wasted pity figuring out which nephew. Infraction flagged. Undeclared lateness. Penalty proposed. Visibility. Lien issued. Posture thread A. Threads unrolled from the edges of 2 curtains. The lien right at work. Fine filaments angling not for hull, but for the manner of the ship. Darrow lifted rope in that steady, non-signal way and gave the threads a friendlier place to sit. They did. He curled the coil up as if returning yarn to a basket. Thread A swept, he reported, voice boring on purpose. Item 3. Accounting of plainness. SUB item, measure hum. Tessa lowered her voice until even she could barely hear it. The ember held count as posture. The new mount left no signature to Bill. Knife shallow, Talon breathed. Varric and Chiron trembled the field once. Didn't tremble where the clerk expected to be pleased. Ira rested again. The sub-item lost enthusiasm. Peer review. The middle curtain tried a different tactic. It projected a rubric made of habit. Columns labeled compliant late, /strategic late, /suspicious late, and rows for hum, /heat, /hinge, /human. Boxes waited to be ticked. Rubrics don't like being bored, Iris said, amused. Let's waste it. Varric toggled to old pain. Click. Heat folded like a blanket over tired knees. Tessa kept the hum half a breath wrong. Chiron filed an already filed stamp into the corners. Boxes ticked themselves UNSCORABLE. Request. Narrative of purpose optional. Decline optional, Saran murmured. Nobody laughed. It was the correct level of humor. From the far right, a quieter curtain cleared its metaphorical throat. Query. Are mercy corridors, cleaning plates, operating without permit? Did your parliament issue permits for broom closets? Darrow asked the bulkhead, politely. He lifted a second thread off the ship's manor and draped it on a guidepost. If so, the permit is late. Chiron slid a maintenance request for that very question into the Moore's underlayer, filed in repairs, cleaning. A clerk somewhere inside the habit found itself obliged to stamp a thing that had already been stamped. The rubric dimmed. Motion to adjourn without saying so. Parliaments die of procedure when you feed them nothing else. Tessa's hum refused melody. Ira's rests occupied agenda slots. Varric's hinge changed ugliness on a schedule nobody had taught in school. Talon and Chiron moved the knife shallow, then absent. Darrow built a small museum of lean-right threads on ceramic posts. Saran did not accelerate when patients asked for spectacle. Cyrus kept quiet on purpose and let the room not know him. The curtain's edges furled and unfurled like officials glancing at clocks that don't exist. New business, none. Old business, pending. Action items, tabled. Tables heavy, Varric observed. Let's not help them lift it, Saran agreed. They leaned into a paper corridor Ira had found between two disagreements and moved as if the meeting had already ended and everyone knew to go home without applause. One curtain tried a final flourish, statement of, and tripped on the thin white line Ira had drawn in silence across the floor of the moor. It stepped around its own embarrassment. Raptor-One passed the invisible table without knocking a knee. Minutes of nothing. Gray River took them back the way a good kitchen takes people in from rain. Van's cool. Hood patient. Bull's thirsty. They banked first. Ember to Basin's lip. Ira counted. Tessa laid hum. Varric put heat into weather. Hood returned pride to boredom. Bowles answered present. Only then did the board accept the day. Ira chalked a tiny grid on the slab and wrote unscorable across it with the pad of her finger. Rubric failed, she said, satisfied. Silence passed. Varric set the hinge down and toggled it once for the board's sake. My nephew fixed it. We taught it 3 wrongs that don't add to a right, and that's what we wanted. Darrow hung 2 pale lean right threads on a nail at the slab's edge, a little museum of things removed without drama. We'll weave them into a mat for the hood, he said. Let boredom step on bureaucracy. Chiron pinned a scrap that had ridden the moor's pressure to their hull, a kind of peer review that read no findings/review continued/presenter late. Under it, Cyrus wrote in grease pencil. Meeting adjourned for lack of interest. Talon slid a strip of tape with the knife's shallow set Doc 12 dialect under the board's rim. Varied honesty, they reminded. Tax paid. Tessa set her shard beside the seed and hummed 2 notes half a breath apart until the water agreed. Room pleased, she said. No tricks taught. Saran put both palms on the slab. Parliament convened. They recorded, failed to make law. We will not let waiting become a statute. The elder poured a measure into the empty bowl and moved it toward the hearth. Payment made, they said. Bring me their minutes next time, and I'll use them to start a stove. Warmth permitted 1 sentence. Under the dock's cousin of a hood, the hall's bell low, the ember steady, the bench remembered them both. They kept their rule. 1 sentence, Tessa said. Cyrus sifted 1,000 and chose one small. I liked letting a meeting end because no one cared enough to keep it alive, he said. Me too, she answered, smiling where only he could see. They kissed once and let the ember have the room again. Check in? He added. Here, she said. Still no beacon. A beat. You? Steady, he said, tapping the tea-tin labeled steady as if to prove it to himself, and found he didn't need to. Orders without applause. Practice arrived as chores. 3 more citations found pinned to cleaning plates upriver, lean-right threads attempting to make kindness stand in line. Spindlemore's Parliament rumored to have filed a peer review of boredom, circulating rubrics that measure plainness for entertainment value. Low choir changed key again, still not radiant, still not autumn. Its miscount now inviting rather than testing, like a room trying to learn the word please. Low choir next, Saran said. We bring a count that doesn't force a song. We listen without teaching. We keep rope handy. We vary honesty until even the lean right falls asleep. Bring 8, the tall median called from the door. Blind lens, the organizer added. Leave room, the elder finished, as if blessing a kitchen. Raptor-One turned her bow toward a hum that might want to join the accord and a clerk that might want to tie that hum to a desk. The hinge clicked old pain once, new bruise the next corridor, and nobody clapped. The work was to keep it that way.
Thank you for listening. If you would like to be notified about upcoming releases to the Raptor-One series, please subscribe. This has been a Bad Karma Drone production.